He wasn't supposed to survive. The rope pulls tight against the night as a German shepherd trembles on his hind legs, jaws locked on frayed fibers, fighting gravity with everything his body has left while beneath him. Officer Daniel Hayes hangs inches above the cold forest floor, boots scraping dirt, breath shallow, each second thinner than the last. The air smells of wet pine and rust, and somewhere far off, a single branch cracks, too deliberate to be wind, too quiet to be chance. But Daniel can't turn his head, can't see. Only feel the slow fade creeping into his limbs as the dog, Rex, refuses to let go, muscles shaking, paws slipping, eyes burning with something deeper than training, something older than commands. Stay. Daniel whispers, voice barely there, and Rex answers not with sound, but with pressure, tightening his grip even as the rope strains harder, even as the weight becomes impossible. The forest listens, still and watching, holding its breath as if it knows what comes next. A mile away, in a cabin that hasn't seen light in weeks, a man stands motionless by the door, head tilted slightly, as if hearing something no one else could, something carried through trees and memory and instinct. Caleb Vance hasn't worn a uniform in years, but some things don't leave you, some signals don't fade, and the faint, distant cry of a working dog in distress cuts through him like a forgotten command. He doesn't rush, doesn't panic, just reaches for an old jacket, a blade worn smooth with time, and steps into the cold without turning on a single light. Back in the forest, Rex falters for a fraction of a second, paws slipping against loose soil, his body dropping an inch before he recovers, teeth grinding harder into the rope, refusing to fail, refusing to let the man beneath him disappear into silence. Daniel's vision blurs, the stars above him stretching into streaks, and for a moment, he thinks of nothing. No badge, no past, just the warmth of a presence still fighting for him, still holding on when everything else says to let go. The wind shifts, carrying a new scent through the trees, unfamiliar but steady, and Rex's ears twitch even as his body shakes, as if recognizing something beyond sight. Somewhere behind them, unseen and unheard, a shadow moves between trunks with the patience of someone who has waited longer than this, someone who knows exactly when to step forward and when to remain part of the dark. The rope creaks again, louder this time, fibers straining under a weight they were never meant to carry, and Rex's legs buckle just enough to make the world tilt, just enough to make time slow to a breath. And then, without warning, the tension changes, not gone, not yet, but different, like something unseen has taken hold of the moment itself. Rex doesn't look back, doesn't dare, but something in the air tells him they are no longer alone. And somewhere in that silent space between heartbeat and breath, between falling and holding on, a presence arrives that neither man nor dog can see, but both can feel. The forest does not speak, but it shifts, and that is enough. Rex feels it first, not as sound, not as sight, but as a change in the air itself, like the moment before rain when everything pauses, and his trembling steadies just enough for one more breath, one more pull, one more refusal to let go. Daniel drifts somewhere between waking and darkness, the weight around his chest pressing harder, his fingers barely twitching as if trying to reach for something already slipping away, and yet, beneath that fading edge there is a strange certainty, a feeling that the night has not finished with him yet. Somewhere behind the line of trees, Caleb moves without urgency, each step placed with care, boots brushing over pine needles without a sound, his breathing slow, controlled, the way it used to be on long patrols where silence meant survival. And though years have passed since those days, his body remembers what his mind no longer tries to hold. He pauses once, just once, lowering himself slightly as he studies the ground, the faint impressions in the dirt, the broken twigs, the story written in small details that most would miss. And he reads it the way he always has, not with judgment, not with anger, but with clarity. Ahead, the rope tightens again with a dry, stretching sound, and Rex's legs shake harder now, the strain too much for muscle alone, his jaws aching, his breath coming in short bursts through his nose. Yet still he does not release, because somewhere deep in him lives a promise that was never spoken out loud but was understood from the first day he was chosen. The The first day a hand rested on his head and said without words that leaving was not an option. Caleb hears that sound, the faint scrape, the quiet struggle, and something in his chest shifts, not emotion exactly, but recognition, a pattern he has seen before, a moment suspended between loss and decision. He does not rush forward, not yet, because rushing creates noise, and noise changes outcomes, and outcomes matter. Instead, he circles slightly, letting the wind carry his presence away from them, positioning himself where the night will work with him instead of against him. Daniel's head tilts just enough for his cheek to brush against the cold air, and for a second, just a second, he feels something different, a change in pressure, like the weight is easing by a fraction too small to trust, and his mind tries to follow it, tries to understand, but the darkness pulls him back again. Rex whines softly now, the sound barely more than a breath, not from fear, but from effort, from the edge of what his body can sustain, and his eyes flick once toward the trees, drawn by something unseen, something that does not threaten, does not startle, but simply exists, steady and certain. Caleb steps closer, still out of sight, watching the line of the rope, the angle of tension, the position of the dog, calculating without numbers, without words, just instinct shaped over years of moments like this. And he knows there is not much time. Not for the man, not for the animal, not for the fragile balance holding them both between ground and air. The wind rises slightly, brushing through the branches above, and in that soft movement, in that brief cover of sound, Caleb finally closes the distance, one step, then another, until he stands just beyond the edge of what either of them can see. And for a heartbeat, everything is still, the rope, the dog, the man, the forest itself holding its breath as if waiting for a choice to be made. Then, without a word, without a signal, the tension begins to change. The change is small at first, so small it could be mistaken for hope playing tricks, but Rex feels it in his teeth, in the fibers no longer biting back with the same force, and for a fraction of a second his trembling steadies, his body lifting just enough to hold the line, as if something unseen has taken a share of the weight. Daniel's chest rises deeper this time, a breath that does not burn as sharply, and though his eyes remain half closed, something inside him stirs, a quiet awareness that the fall has been delayed, that the night has shifted in a way he cannot explain. Behind him, Caleb's hands move with deliberate calm, not hurried, not hesitant, fingers testing the tension, reading the strain the way a mechanic listens to an engine, understanding where it will give and where it will hold, and he adjusts without sound, without announcement, easing the burden inch by inch until the balance tips just enough in their favor. Rex lets out a low, broken exhale, not quite a bark, not quite a cry, but something closer to relief, though he does not release, not yet, because instinct tells him the moment is not finished, that holding on is still the only thing that matters. The forest remains quiet, wrapped in that same watchful stillness, as if it recognizes the presence of someone who does not disturb more than necessary, someone who moves within its rhythm instead of against it. Caleb shifts his stance, grounding himself, and for the first time his gaze settles fully on the dog, on the set of his ears, the line of his back, the way he refuses to yield even as his strength fades. And something flickers in Caleb's expression, not surprise, not quite memory, but recognition of something rare, something earned. The rope loosens another fraction, enough that Daniel's boots finally brush the ground with a faint scrape, and that contact, small as it is, sends a signal through his body, a return, a reminder that he is not suspended between worlds anymore. His fingers twitch again, stronger now, and a faint sound escapes his throat. Not a word, just the beginning of one. As if language itself is returning step by step, Rex feels the shift immediately and adjusts, lowering himself slightly, redistributing what little strength he has left, still refusing to let go until the last ounce of tension is gone, until the thread is not just reduced but removed. Caleb works with quiet precision, guiding the rope away, easing it free without sudden movement, without drawing attention, his actions blending into the night so completely they almost seem like part of it. The final strain releases not with a snap, not with a sound of drama, but with a soft surrender, fibers giving way to gravity, to choice, to something decided without words. Daniel drops the last few inches, his knees buckling as they meet the ground. But the earth holds him, solid and real, and his breath comes back in a rough, uneven rhythm that feels like returning from somewhere far away. Rex stumbles forward. Immediately, his body collapsing beside Daniel, pressing close, his nose pushing against his chest, as if confirming, as if counting each breath, each rise and fall, making sure the promise has been kept. For a moment, nothing else exists, not the trees, not the cold, not the unseen presence standing just behind them. Only the fragile, quiet proof that they are both still here. Caleb steps back half a pace, his work already complete, his presence already beginning to fade into the edges of the night. And though neither man nor dog turns to see him, something passes between them all the same, a silent acknowledgement carried in the air, in the stillness, in the way the forest slowly exhales as if a balance has been restored. The night does not rush back to life. It lingers, as if even time itself is cautious now, unwilling to disturb what has just been spared. And Daniel lies there on the cold ground, his chest rising unevenly, each breath a fragile return, each inhale carrying the sharp scent of pine and damp earth that tells him he is still here, still anchored to something real. Rex does not move far, his body pressed close, his head resting against Daniel's side, ears alert but no longer rigid, as if the storm inside him has passed, but the watch remains, always the watch. Daniel's fingers find the fur at Rex's neck, weak at first, then firmer, curling into it with a quiet gratitude that needs no words, and his voice, when it comes, is rough and broken, barely more than a whisper carried by the air. "Good boy, you stayed." And Rex answers with a soft exhale, his tail giving a faint, tired motion against the dirt, a few yards away. Caleb stands still, not hidden, but not revealed either, existing in that space where presence does not demand attention, his eyes moving over the scene one last time, confirming what matters, that both lives have crossed back from the edge, that the line has held. He does not step closer, does not speak, because some moments are not meant to be interrupted. Some bonds do not need a witness to be real. The wind brushes through the trees again, lighter now, carrying away the tension that had settled over the clearing. And with it comes a distant sound, faint but growing, the low hum of an approaching vehicle somewhere beyond the forest line, a reminder that the world outside this moment is still moving, still turning. Daniel hears it too, though it feels far away, like something from another life, and his head turns slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of the trees beyond Rex's silhouette, and for a brief second, he thinks he sees something there, a figure, still and quiet, watching without intruding, his eyes narrow, trying to focus, trying to hold on to that shape before it dissolves back into shadow. And there is something about it, something familiar in a way he cannot place, like a memory just out of reach. Rex notices it as well, his ears shifting, his gaze lifting from Daniel to the same point in the trees. And for a moment, dog and man share that same silent question, that same awareness of something beyond them. Caleb meets that gaze, not with movement, not with acknowledgement, but with stillness. The kind that says enough has been done, that the rest does not belong to him. He reaches into his jacket slowly, carefully, and for a second, the faint glint of metal catches what little light filters through the branches, a small object worn by time, edges softened by years of being carried more than used. He pauses, weighing something unseen, then lets it slip from his fingers, not tossed, not dropped carelessly, but placed into the earth with quiet intention. Daniel's attention drifts again, his strength not yet returned, his body choosing rest over questions, and his hand tightens slightly in Rex's fur as if anchoring himself to the one certainty he has left. The distant vehicle grows louder now, headlights beginning to glow faintly through the trees, cutting thin lines of white across the dark, and with that light comes the inevitability of voices, of questions, of explanations that will never fully capture what has happened here. Caleb takes one step back, then another, each movement deliberate, each one pulling him further into the shadows until the forest accepts him again, until he is no longer a figure but a memory, a presence that leaves no trace except what it chose to leave behind. Rex watches until there is nothing left to see, his gaze lingering a moment longer than necessary, as if understanding something Daniel cannot yet grasp, and then he lowers his head again, settling beside his partner as the sound of help draws closer, as the night begins to loosen its hold. And somewhere between the fading dark and the coming light, the quiet truth remains that not all rescues come with names, and not all saviors stay long enough to be known. The headlights arrive first, thin beams cutting through the trees like quiet questions, followed by the low hum of an engine slowing over uneven ground, and then voices, distant at first, then closer, cautious, as if even those approaching can feel that something sacred has already happened here. Daniel hears them like echoes through water, his mind still heavy, his body slow to respond, but the warmth beside him remains constant. Rex pressed close, steady, breathing in a rhythm that anchors him to the present. Hands reach him gently, not pulling, not rushing, just checking, supporting, voices asking his name, asking if he can hear, and he answers in fragments, enough to be understood, enough to prove he is still here. Rex resists for a second when they try to guide him back, not aggressive, not afraid, just unwilling to leave, until Daniel's hand moves again, brushing against his fur with a faint command that carries trust, and only then does the dog ease, though his eyes never leave his partner. As they lift Daniel carefully, the ground shifts beneath him, and something catches his attention, something small and out of place against the dark soil, a faint glint half hidden near where he had fallen. His fingers twitch toward it instinctively, brushing the dirt until they close around cool metal, worn smooth, edges softened by time and use, and even before he can fully see it, something inside him tightens, a recognition that does not come from memory, but from feeling. He turns it slightly in his hand, just enough for the faint engraving to catch the light, letters dulled but still there, a name, a number, a mark of something that belonged to a life lived in quiet service. Daniel's breath catches, not from pain this time, but from the weight of that object, from the silent story it carries, and he looks toward the trees again, slower now, more focused, searching for the shape he thought he saw. But the forest has already closed around itself, shadows returning to their places, branches swaying gently as if nothing had passed through them at all. Rex notices the shift in Daniel's attention and leans closer, his nose brushing the hand that holds the metal, and for a moment, his posture changes, subtle but unmistakable, ears lifting, body stilling in a way that suggests memory, not of this moment, but of something older, something buried deep in instinct and training. The responders speak again, guiding Daniel toward the waiting vehicle, wrapping him in warmth, checking his breathing, but his focus lingers on that small piece of metal, turning it slowly between his fingers as if trying to unlock what it means. One of them asks what he is holding, and Daniel hesitates, then answers quietly, "Not mine," because he knows that much, knows it does not belong to him, and yet it feels like it was left for him, placed with intention, with purpose. The vehicle doors close with a soft, solid sound, and the engine hums again, this time carrying them away from the clearing, away from the place where something unseen stepped in and changed the outcome without asking for recognition. Rex settles at Daniel's side inside, his head resting against his leg, eyes half closed but alert, as if guarding not just the man, but the moment itself. The forest begins to fall behind them, trees thinning, the darkness giving way to the faintest hint of early light along the horizon. And with that light comes clarity, not full, not complete, but enough for Daniel to begin asking questions he does not yet know how to form. He looks down once more at the object in his hand, tracing the engraved letters with his thumb, and a thought forms slowly, quietly, not spoken aloud, not shared with anyone in the vehicle, but held close, as if saying it might make it disappear. Somewhere out there, someone had been watching, someone who understood exactly when to act and exactly when to leave. Someone who chose to remain unknown, leaving behind only this single proof that they had ever been there at all. And as the vehicle moves farther from the trees, as the forest becomes just a line against the growing light, Daniel closes his hand around the metal, holding it not as evidence, not as a clue, but as something else entirely, something closer to a promise, though he does not yet know why. Morning does not arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, pale light stretching across the sky as the vehicle carries Daniel farther from the trees, farther from the place where something unseen changed the course of his life. And inside, the quiet hum of the engine becomes a steady backdrop to the fragile rhythm of his breathing. Rex remains close, his body angled toward Daniel, every movement measured, every shift deliberate, as if the dog understands that survival is not just about making it through the night, but about what comes after. The warmth of the blanket settles over Daniel's shoulders, the scent of clean fabric replacing the cold bite of the forest, yet his hand does not loosen around the small piece of metal he found. His fingers curled tightly, as if it might disappear if he lets go. One of the responders speaks gently, asking simple questions, guiding him back into clarity. And Daniel answers as best he can, his voice steadier now, though still low, still carrying the weight of what he does not fully understand. They ask what happened, and he hesitates, not because he does not remember, but because the truth feels incomplete, like a story missing its final piece. And after a moment, he simply says, "We were not alone," and leaves it there, because anything more would sound like something he cannot prove. Rex lifts his head slightly at those words, his ears tilting forward, as if confirming what Daniel already knows, as if the dog has no need for proof, only recognition. The road stretches ahead, lined with fading darkness and the first hints of daylight, and with each mile, the forest becomes smaller behind them, but it does not leave Daniel's mind. It stays with him, in the quiet spaces between breaths, in the way his fingers trace the edges of the metal he holds. When they finally arrive at the hospital, the world shifts again, bright lights replacing shadows, clean walls replacing trees, voices clearer now, more direct, more grounded in the present, and hands guide him carefully inside, checking, supporting, making sure the line he crossed during the night does not pull him back. Rex resists the separation at first, his body leaning toward Daniel, his eyes fixed, but a calm voice reassures him, and after a moment, he allows it, though he stays close enough that the connection is never broken. Daniel is placed onto a bed, the surface firm and steady beneath him, and for the first time since the forest, he feels something like stillness, not the tense stillness of waiting, but the quiet kind that comes after something has passed. A nurse notices the object in his hand and gently asks if he can let go for a moment, and Daniel hesitates, his grip tightening instinctively, before he slowly opens his fingers, revealing the worn metal tag resting in his palm. The nurse studies it briefly, then looks back at him with a question in her eyes, and Daniel shakes his head softly. "It is not mine," he says again, the words carrying more meaning now, more weight. Rex watches from a short distance, his posture calm but attentive, and when Daniel glances toward him, there is something shared between them, something unspoken but understood, a memory that belongs to both of them, even if only one of them can try to put it into words. As the room settles, as the sounds of equipment and quiet conversation fill the space, Daniel closes his eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to hold on to the feeling that remains, the certainty that what happened in that forest was not chance, was not luck, but something else entirely, something deliberate, and somewhere far beyond the walls of the hospital, beyond the reach of those bright lights and careful voices. A man walks alone along the edge of a quiet road, his steps steady, his path already turning away from where he had been, carrying nothing with him now except the same silence he arrived with, leaving behind only the smallest trace of his presence in the hands of someone who will spend the rest of his life trying to understand why. Time moves differently inside the hospital, measured not by the sun but by quiet sounds, soft footsteps, distant monitors, and the steady rhythm of recovery that asks nothing except patience. And Daniel begins to feel it in small ways first, the return of strength to his fingers, the clarity behind his eyes, the slow unwinding of the night that still lingers in fragments across his thoughts. Rex is never far, lying just within reach, his presence constant, his breathing calm but attentive, as if he has accepted that the danger has passed, but not the duty that remains. Nurses come and go, their voices gentle, their questions simple, and Daniel answers them more fully now, grounding himself in the details of the present. Yet every so often his gaze drifts to the small metal tag resting on the table beside him, placed there with care, but never out of reach. He studies it again and again, tracing the worn letters, the faint indentations that time has softened but not erased. And though he has seen countless tags before, this one feels different, not because of what it says, but because of how it came into his hand. One afternoon, as light filters through the window in long, quiet lines, a uniformed officer steps into the room, respectful, measured, carrying the kind of presence that comes with questions that matter, and he introduces himself simply, asking Daniel to recount what he remembers. Daniel takes a breath, glancing once toward Rex, then begins, describing the forest, the silence, the moment when everything began to fade, and then the shift, the change he could not explain, the feeling that something had stepped in without being seen. The officer listens carefully, not interrupting, not dismissing, but when Daniel finishes, there is a pause, a space where words might question or doubt, yet none come, only a quiet nod, as if some part of the story does not need to be spoken aloud to be understood. Daniel hesitates, then reaches for the tag, holding it up slightly. "This was there," he says, his voice steady. And the officer takes it gently, turning it in his hand, his expression changing just enough to be noticed. "Where did you find this?" he asks, and Daniel answers simply, "Right where I fell." Because anything more would only complicate what is already difficult to explain. The officer studies the tag longer this time, his eyes narrowing slightly, recognition flickering across his face in a way that suggests history, not surprise, and when he hands it back, his voice is quieter, more careful. "This belongs to someone who has not been active in a long time," he says, choosing his words with precision, as if each one carries weight beyond the moment. Daniel feels that weight immediately, the confirmation that what he sensed was real, that someone had been there, someone who chose to remain unseen, and he nods slowly, not pressing for more, because something tells him the rest is not meant to be given easily. Rex shifts slightly at the foot of the bed, his ears lifting as if he recognizes the tone more than the words, as if the meaning passes through something deeper than language. The officer stands after a moment, offering no further explanation, only a final glance that carries a quiet respect, then turns and leaves, the door closing softly behind him. Daniel sits with the silence that follows, his hand closing again around the tag, feeling its edges, its weight, and for the first time since the forest, a new understanding begins to take shape, not complete, not fully clear, but enough to change how he sees what happened. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of reports and questions, beyond the structure of names and records, there is someone who still moves in the quiet spaces, someone who answers moments like that without needing to be known. And as Daniel looks down at the worn metal resting in his hand, he realizes that some stories are not meant to be finished, only carried forward, one breath, one step at a time. Days pass in quiet layers, not marked by dramatic change, but by the slow return of normal things. The way sunlight feels warmer through the window, the way Daniel's steps become steadier across the hospital floor, the way Rex begins to relax just enough to rest without watching every movement in the room. The world outside continues as it always has, unaware of the thin line that was crossed in a silent forest, unaware that something unseen chose to intervene and then disappear without a trace. Daniel is discharged on a cool morning, the air crisp, carrying the faint scent of early fall, and as he steps outside for the first time since that night, he pauses, letting the open sky settle over him, letting the weight of being alive land in a way that no report or explanation could ever capture. Rex walks beside him, close but calm, his stride strong again, his eyes scanning out of habit but no longer searching for danger, and together they move toward the patrol vehicle waiting at the curb, a return to something familiar, something structured, even if nothing feels exactly the same. The metal tag rests in Daniel's pocket now, not hidden, not displayed, simply carried. Its presence constant, its meaning still unfolding. Later that afternoon, back at the station, the routine resumes in quiet ways, paperwork, brief conversations, the low hum of radios and distant voices. Yet Daniel finds himself drifting, his attention pulled again and again to the memory of that moment when everything shifted, when the night chose a different ending. One of his colleagues asks if he remembers anything unusual, anything that might explain how he and Rex made it through, and Daniel pauses before answering, his gaze lowering slightly as if searching for the right words, but none feel sufficient, none feel true enough. So he simply says, "We got help," and leaves it at that, because anything more would only invite questions that do not have answers. Rex lies nearby, head resting on his paws, but at the sound of Daniel's voice, his ears lift slightly, as if the word help carries meaning beyond its definition, as if it points to something he already understands. That evening, as the station quiets and the day begins to fade, Daniel steps outside alone, the sky turning soft shades of gray and gold, and he reaches into his pocket, pulling out the tag once more, holding it in the open air where light catches the worn surface, revealing the faint engraving that has survived years of silence. He turns it slowly, feeling the edges, the small imperfections, and for the first time, he does not try to solve it, does not try to connect it to a report or a record. He simply accepts it for what it is, a sign that not everything needs to be explained to be real. Somewhere beyond the streets, beyond the reach of the city's quiet noise, a figure moves along the edge of a long, empty road, the horizon stretching wide ahead, the sky fading into evening, and though there is no one there to see him, no one to mark his passing, his steps remain steady, purposeful, carrying him farther from the place where he chose to act and closer to wherever his path leads next. Back at the station, Daniel closes his hand around the tag one last time before slipping it back into his pocket, not as evidence, not as a mystery to solve, but as something else entirely, something that reminds him that even in the darkest moments, when everything seems to narrow to a single breath, there are still forces that move quietly, unseen, guided not by recognition, but by something deeper, something that does not need a name to matter. Weeks pass, not in a rush, but in steady, measured steps, the kind that rebuilds something quiet and unseen. And Daniel returns to duty not as the man he was before, but as someone who has crossed a line he cannot quite define, someone who now carries a moment that does not belong to reports or records. Rex walks beside him through it all, his presence unchanged yet somehow deeper, his eyes holding a calm certainty that no longer searches for danger, but simply acknowledges it when it comes, as if the night in the forest has settled something inside him that words could never reach. The patrols resume, the streets familiar, the routine steady. Yet every so often Daniel feels it again, that subtle shift in the air, that quiet awareness that something greater than chance moves through the world without needing to be seen. One evening, long after the sun has dipped below the horizon and the city lights hum softly against the dark, Daniel and Rex find themselves near the edge of a wooded road. Not the same forest, but close enough that the scent of pine and cool earth stirs something in memory. They step out of the vehicle for a moment, the air still, the world quiet, and Daniel takes a breath that feels heavier than the rest, not with fear, but with recognition. His hand slips into his pocket, finding the worn metal tag without looking, his fingers wrapping around it the way they have so many times before. And for a moment, he closes his eyes, not to search, not to question, but simply to acknowledge. Rex stands beside him, ears forward, gaze fixed on the tree line. Not tense, not alert in the way of warning, but attentive in a different way, as if listening for something that does not make a sound. The wind moves gently through the branches, carrying with it the faintest shift, the kind that most would never notice. But Daniel does, and so does Rex. Slowly, Daniel opens his eyes and looks toward the trees, not expecting to see anything, not needing to. And yet for the briefest moment, there is a shape there, still and quiet, just beyond the edge of certainty. It does not move, does not reveal itself. It simply exists, like a memory given form for a single breath. Daniel does not call out, does not step forward, because something inside him understands that this is not a moment meant to be held onto, but one meant to be respected. Rex gives a soft exhale, his tail making a slow, single movement, not of excitement, not of fear, but of recognition. As if greeting something familiar without needing to approach, the shape fades as quietly as it appeared, blending back into the shadows until there is nothing left but the trees and the soft movement of night. Daniel lowers his gaze, his hand still closed around the tag, and for the first time, he feels no need to understand it, No need to trace it back to a name or a record, because the truth has already settled in a place deeper than questions. He slips the tag back into his pocket, not as a mystery, but as a reminder, and turns back toward the vehicle, Rex falling into step beside him without hesitation. The road stretches ahead, lit by soft beams of light, steady and clear, and as they drive away, the forest recedes once more into darkness, holding its silence, holding its secrets. Somewhere beyond that darkness, a man continues to walk a path that does not cross with others unless it must, a path defined not by recognition, but by quiet decisions made in moments that matter. And though the world will never speak his name, though no report will ever carry his story, the impact remains, carried forward in the steady steps of a man and a dog who learned, in a single night, that sometimes the greatest acts of mercy arrive without a voice, without a face, and leave behind only the quiet certainty that they were never truly alone.